Hello, welcome to this month's edition of Hope and Help for Families. My name is Matthew J. Watts, and I'm normally your host, but this month I am going to be the one interviewed, and my good friend, Mr. Tony Gordon, will be serving as the guest host today. Tony, welcome to the program.
Welcome, always a pleasure to be here.
Good to have you, and good to have you in that seat and me in this seat.
I was getting ready to ask you, how's it feel being over in that seat?
It feels good, it feels good.
Pastor, what I would like for you to do right off the bat is to tell me where you think the state of the black community is, the African American community in the state of West Virginia is right now.
Well, and I think there's some wonderful things that's taking place. I think our churches in particular continue to do incredible work in communities, providing pastoral care and nurturing support for people in the communities. And we have some fraternity groups, sorority groups, and lodges doing some great things. And so there's some great things happening, but we face some serious challenges in terms of the breakdown of the family, the educational achievement gap that is well documented. Our children are not performing at the levels that they need to perform at to be competitive in a global economy. There's a disparity in health care. We're dying disproportionately from cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes complications. There's a much higher unemployment rate for African Americans than there is for Caucasians. And so we face some real challenges, and unfortunately things are not moving in the right direction. And so we're trying to send out a clarion call. It's time for us to come together at the community level and see if we can respond to the challenges and to the crises that we face in certain aspects of the community.
Now, Pastor, I know you and I know the work that you've done, and I see it firsthand a lot in the community. But I have to ask you, we've had this big march now, and the march is over. And first I want to ask you, do you have an opinion on the march and how you think it went? And a couple other questions we're going to try to see if you can elaborate on is where you think we go from there.
Sure. Well, you know, I think that the march appeared to be a success in terms of there was a good turnout. Everything was done decently and in order, and I expected no less than that based on my conversation with some of the people that were involved. And I think it was an opportunity for some people to have a platform and a venue to articulate some of their opinions and some of their ideas. And there were some issues that were raised that certainly needs to be discussed in the African American community within the broader community at large.
Well, I have to ask you this one too, and at least give you a chance to articulate for yourself. In the communities, there's a lot of question as to why you and the other pastors that belong to the Black Ministerial Alliance chose to not endorse the march and not participate in it. You care to elaborate on
I would
you
prefer,
personally?
Yeah, I prefer to speak for my own personal, because I don't want to try to speak for other individuals. You know, at no time did we state that we were against it, because we weren't against the march, and we certainly supported the young woman and her family that's went through a very atrocious and a very horrific experience. And so we were not against it, the march, and we would support anyone having the constitutional right to freedom to peacefully assemble, you know, and have a march or demonstration. It wasn't that at all. My personal reason for not participating was, number one, we had no involvement in the planning or the organizing of the march. It was done for the most part, from what I could gather, from people that were out of town. And secondly, you know, we felt that there would be things said that we just didn't agree with. And there would be some things said in a way that we would not feel comfortable being associated with that. And we have a first responsibility, you know, to the God that we serve and how we represent Him. Secondly, you know, to our own families and to our local church and the people that I have a responsibility for leading. And so I just cannot lend my support and my credibility to events that I don't feel comfortable being associated with. That doesn't mean that I am against it. It just means that I have to live in this community after people who do things leave, and there's an expectation that some people have for me in terms of how I'm going to conduct myself. And I didn't want to be in a position of having to defend or distance myself from some things that might be said at that march that I just simply did not agree with. And so I felt the best course of action for me was to not be at that march and not participate, but to maintain the clear, consistent, clarion voice that we've tried to have for over 20 years in this city, trying to fight for and trying to advocate for poor people and black people in particular.
Well, you touched on something interesting when you mentioned that the organizers of this march, they are since gone, and you guys as leaders of these local communities are left. And so with that being said, where would you suggest, or what do you think, and what are your ideas of where we should go now? Because obviously we're going to have some disconnect with some people that didn't get to hear you guys' reasoning for not participating. And so how do you pull that all back together? And as a community, for all those that have so much passion and pathos about participating in the march, how do we use that energy to advance the causes of the community?
I think we just got to come back together. There have been some things said that could be divisive. There were some things said at the march, some comments made that was insulting and belittling toward the pastors who were not there. And that's one of the reasons that I didn't want to be there, because these ministers are my personal friends and we work together, and I was concerned that there would be some things said that would be belittling and insulting to them. But I think we've got to move beyond that, and we've got to realize that we are here together. There were some issues that were raised that are legitimate. Crimes against women, maybe we have not been as sensitive to that. Maybe we've not put that as a priority to be addressed in our community like we should be talking about it. And so this march and the interest around this case have brought this to the forefront. That's something now that needs to be placed front and center on the table for us to discuss in our churches and community gatherings, and how can we as a community come together to see if we can reduce and, with the Lord's help, eliminate crimes against women. We've got to come back to the table and delineate what are the issues, what are the challenges, what are the resources, where's our levels of commitment, where's our passion, and work together to develop a plan where that people can engage, where they have personal interest and personal passion. There's no one thing that's going to be done that's going to erase all the challenges in the community, but it's a combination of a lot of things being done simultaneously and in collaboration and synergy together to where we can see improvement taking place. But I think where we've got to start is coming back together and talking to each other civilly and respectfully, and realizing that we may not have agreed on participating in this event, but we do all agree that things need to change in this city, this county, and in this state for African American people, and that if that change is going to occur, it's going to start with us working together to make it happen.
That's interesting, because there were a number of reasons why people marched at that march. And some of those issues, violence against women, I know there were people that protested for that. And of course, people were just there just to show the young girl that they supported her. Mm-hmm. But the march's organizers organized this march as a march against having hate crimes charged against those 6 people who are alleged to have committed a crime or accused of committing a crime mm-hmm. against this young lady over in Logan County. What is your take on this hate crimes, and do you think they should be filed?
Well, I'm not an attorney, mm-hmm. But just as a layperson, that it appears to me that there is legitimate grounds for filing hate crime charges, at least at the state level. And I don't think that the prosecuting attorney in Logan County, Mr. Abraham, has ruled that out, that there's still a possibility that might occur. But I think what this has done, it has elevated this whole hate crimes issue mm-hmm. On the agenda in the community, and that is a good thing. And I commend Mr. Shabazz for doing that, because I believe that we should have a discussion, particularly from the legal community. One of my concerns has been the silence from the legal community, namely the Mountain State Bar Association, the West Virginia State Bar Association, and West Virginia University Law School. These are the legal scholars, and I think that it would be helpful and beneficial to the community if the legal people would weigh in and have a serious debate around the whole idea of filing hate crime, and as to whether or not hate crime should have been filed in this chart. I think that would be helpful for the community. This hate crime thing is something we have to discuss, and we don't like to talk about it because it causes us to look at institutional racism, historical racism, practical racism. It forces us to have a dialogue about race, and normally we recoil and we back away from having that conversation because it's too painful, so we don't make much progress. But this may force us to come to the table and talk about issues of race in a way that can be healthy and therapeutic, and hopefully a way that could bring about healing.
Who are the primary people that need to come to the table so that we could start having these conversations to move forward as far as race relations are concerned in West Virginia?
Well, I think that in this case, the legal community could help, because now we're dealing with the law and the application of the law and the interpretations of the law. I think, of course, the faith community, the pastors need to be at the table, and people from the faith community. I think from the business community, because there's still some concern as to whether or not there's true equal access to employment opportunities. I think from government, we need to have representatives from the broadest components of the community coming together and participating in the dialogue. But it also should be things that people are doing even at the very local level without anybody convening it. The people that live together and work together in close proximity need to start creating comfortable, safe places where they can sit down and have serious conversations about racial issues.
Let me ask you about the Select Committee on Minority Affairs report. Have you had a chance to view that?
Most definitely.
Okay. And so how do you articulate what it says to you?
Well, I think the Select Committee on Minority Affairs, for those viewers who may not be familiar with it, it emerged out of what started as a House Concurrent Resolution 76 in July of 2002. And Delegate Kerry Webster had introduced the House Concurrent Resolution with the support of some other legislators to convene a hearing to discuss the plight of the African American community. And so they brought in a lot of us from the community. People from state government came, and they shared around education, over-incarceration of African Americans, high unemployment rates, health disparities, limited economic development opportunities. So, make a long story short, that House Concurrent Resolution became a select committee, and for the next almost 2 years, the legislature convened hearings all around the state to discuss the plight of the African American community. And at the end of those hearings, the legislature compiled the Select Committee on Minority Affairs. And basically they looked at education, health, economic development, employment, incarceration, and so forth. And they came back and they agreed with what we were saying, that it's pretty bad. And not only did they agree it was pretty bad, in their report, they had recommendations. They said that something should be done about it. And they delineated a list of recommendations of things that the state should consider doing, which included the allocation of resources at the community level to address these issues. Unfortunately, they have implemented very few of the recommendations that they had made, and that's of concern to many of us, is that how could we have an exhaustive discussion all around the state by a select committee from the state legislature. They come back and they themselves list the negative pathology that existed in the community and say something needs to be done about it, yet very little has been done about it, and we think it needs to be revisited.
Well, if we revisit that, and if we can get the legislature to revisit it, first, what are your ideas as to how community people like myself can get involved to encourage our legislators to take a new look at that and revisit it? And second, what should we be doing if we can get them to revisit it? What should we be doing in the meantime?
Well, the first thing we should be doing is we should be working like we have a crisis, and while we're waiting to get this possibly revisited and looked at, and so we've got to engage at the community level. We have education initiatives, a West Virginia Achievement Project, a statewide project that's trying to work to raise the academic performance of low-income and minority students, get some kids in advanced placement. You have groups like the MAC Committee in Kanawha County, and they're trying to do the same thing in Kanawha County, where the West Virginia Achievement Project is a statewide project. You have the Black Medical Society, and they're trying to educate and they're trying to bring to the forefront of our community this crisis that we have in the African American community around health. So what people can start doing is to be educated what's happening locally, getting involved and getting engaged locally, while at the same time trying to have this conversation with their legislators around the select committee, asking them to relook at that and see if it isn't something that should get back on the agenda for consideration as we stand on the brink of another time for the legislature to convene.
Pastor, as a Christian and as a member of this community, I certainly appreciate the Black Ministerial Alliance's stance, the NAACP stance, because they are chosen leaders. They are people. They are men of reason and women. I'm sorry, of reason, and their voices are always been sound, and we can certainly appreciate that. But because of the march, you do have a lot of people out there that are, what I would say, they had their pep rally and now they're ready to go. How can we capitalize on the fact that whether we supported the march or not, and I know certainly that you guys all supported the young lady.
No
it was
question.
just, that you didn't have parts of the planning process and et cetera. But how do we get these people that are energized right now? What would you say to them? What's the first thing they should do to make that march, for whatever reason people stood up and marched, have it come to fruition of moving us forward in our causes for racial equality in West Virginia?
I think one of the first things that everyone that participated in the march should ask themselves, why did I march? In terms of find the reason why they marched. And there was some issue, there was some reason that they were involved. And once that is identified, to say, well, where are people working on that issue? And who are those people? And how can I align with those individuals? We can come together in big groups, but to get things done, we have to break down into smaller groups because we can't all work on the same thing at one time. And there are multiple things that need to be worked on. So I think that's the first thing, identifying why was I there? And if I wasn't there, where's my passion? And then find others with that passion, whether it be education, economic development, trying to deal with the overrepresentation of black youth and adults in the criminal justice system, whether it's being engaged in some initiatives of trying to educate people around health care. I mean, find my passion and then connect with people that are doing that or involved in trying to address that issue. And then realize that I'm not going to find very few people that agree with me on every point. But if I can find common ground to work together on specific issues, then we can start something at our local community level. At the end of the day, we live in local communities. Our lives are affected by what happens to us right there. So find a way to get engaged. At the same time, educating myself about what is happening at a larger level and how I can be a part of a bigger effort. It may be joining NAACP. It may be connected with some group that's trying to address the issue on a larger level, whether it's the West Virginia Achievement Project statewide or the MAC committee in the Kanawha County area. But connecting with people who are trying to get something done. And I think in that we will find people of like mind and of like passion, and together we can see progress being made and we can create momentum to create more progress.
So often people don't know where to go. Okay, so here in Kanawha County, in Charleston where we are, and there's going to be people that have a passion about a number of those issues that we've alluded to. Is there a one-stop place they can go to that someone can start directing them out? I mean, what do you do? I have passion, I have pathos, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to do this, but I don't know where to go because I've never been engaged before.
That's an excellent question. I mean, we'd be more than glad, and they can contact my office at 343-HOPE, 343-4673. And we'll be more than glad to direct them to people that we know. If it's health in Kanawha County, then the Partnership of African American Churches, Pastor James Patterson and their group, they're on the point there, along with Dr. McCowan with the Black Medical Society. If it's education, then it's Dr. Barbara Oden and Brother Derek Gibson and the Maximized Achievement of African American Children in Kanawha County, and we can connect them with that particular group. If it's working with youth, then it's a number of organizations, whether it's New Covenant Community Development Corporation, Pastor James Ely, the Bob Burdett Center, Derek Gibson and Reverend Lord Hill on the East End Family Resource Center, or what we're trying to do with Hope CDC. So we have a lot of partnerships with the groups, and we're more than glad to direct people to where we think good work has been done based on what they say their interests are.
Very good. I'm ready to go back out to the community, and I'm sure that those that will watch will be pleasantly surprised at the outcome of this show and learning from you yourself, how you articulated you all stance, and it's so much different than what the community has portrayed you guys. I certainly appreciate you, and I've followed your work for years, and nobody can discredit the work that you do and the love and the passion that you have for the people. And I certainly thank you for it. And for those of you that are out there, this is a great opportunity to get engaged. Okay, we had our march, and it was peacefully done, and you guys all had issues of why you marched, and now it's time to come do something about it. And as Pastor said, you can call his office at 343-HOPE, and they can start directing you to other entities that can help you with the passion that you have. Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, you know, we're just, we appreciate you being here, and appreciate you serving as our guest host today. We think that there are great challenges, but those great challenges are nothing more than neatly disguised opportunities for us to do some great work. And we're just encouraging people, let's not allow whether people marched or didn't march divide us. We certainly agree that we got to work together to create a better community for everybody. And so we just invite everybody, let's come together and see if we can't find an area of our passion and our interest and get engaged and be a part of turning around what looks to be a bad situation and creating better communities for everyone.
Lastly, I noticed just from the clips, because I wasn't at the march, I was participating in the West Virginia Achievement Project here. That was an exceptional event for kids that are achieving well here. But there weren't many kids there. And I think personally that we're missing the boat when we don't direct and focus a lot of its attention also back to the kids. And so you care to elaborate what your feeling is about the kids in our community?
Yeah, I mean, we often say that children are the future. You know, children are the present, and they also are the future. And I think that's one of the great crises that we face right now, that a high percentage of our children are being born in single female-headed households. That doesn't mean that they can be high achieving kids, but it does mean that someone's have to come along and help those single moms, to help build the resiliency and help kids learn the discipline and what they need. And I believe that as adults, we have a primary responsibility to try to create the most caring, nurturing environment that we can, so the young people can be all they can be and reach their full potential and feel safe and secure and feel valued. And so we're challenging and encouraging everyone. Let's come together and figure out what we can do to help our kids do better academically, provide the type of structured recreational and enrichment activities that they need so that some of their free time is filled with positive activities, and to challenge them to buy into a vision of being part of the solution to improve the quality of life, you know, for themselves, their family, friends, and in the community. And catch a vision to see themselves as the leaders that's going to lead this show in just a few years. Mm-hmm. So we think that the youth have to be a focus at anything that you're going to do. And anytime you've seen significant change happen in any society, anywhere in the world, it's when the young people caught a vision that things could be better. And they chose to engage in some effort to make things better. And they chose to make some sacrifices so that they could be a part of moving things forward in a positive way.
Lastly, was there anything negative about the march?
All in all, I don't think so. I would have wished that there were not negative comments made about people who just simply chose not to be there, you know. But other than that, I mean, I think the march was a very positive thing. I mean, there's a lot of energy. The young adults seem to be energized by it. When I did my call-in radio program this past Sunday morning, I mean, the overwhelming majority of comments were positive in terms of supporting of the march. My philosophy is simple. Anytime you get people to start thinking about what the issues are, you get them to engage, to do something, you know, even if it's just march. You've overcome the inertia of people being idle and passive, and then you've got people moving. And if you can move them toward some type of commitment of involvement and engagement, then hey, you can make some things happen. So, no, I'm pleased, and I'm glad they had a great march, and that everybody was safe, and there were no negative incidents. And again, I think it's something that can be built upon to advance things in our community.
How about what do you think about the fact that that the Black Minister Alliance hasn't really come to your support? I listened to your radio show, and I thought you did well in defending yourself. But have you heard from any of those guys? And I'm sure they appreciate you standing up for them. But are they going to ever publicly speak to the community, or what do they have in the works?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I'm sure there's going to be some type of response. You know, we felt like that we had to speak. A lot of conversation, a lot of discussion was taking place about this march and about regarding the African American ministers as a group not participating. And so we felt like we had to speak, that our voice needed to be heard, and that we've never went anywhere and hid because we were criticized for something. I would have hoped that there would have been more response, you know, from some of the other ministers, but they had their reasons, I'm sure, for not speaking. And where they will speak in the future, I'm not quite sure. But we had to let our voice be heard, and then let the people decide, you know, if they want to listen to the voice. Our position is really simple, and we've tried to be a voice that really articulated what issues were, trying to provide opportunities and trying to encourage people to get involved. And we didn't feel like that we could allow our voice to be subjugated under other voices. You know, that it needs to be the voice that it's been. And then those who have an ear to hear can and will hear. And those who choose to respond to the voice will respond. There's always going to be many voices speaking, you know, and then the people will then decide which voices they want to listen to and which voices are articulating clearly and specifically, you know, what we need to do to see improvement in our lives personally as well as in the community.
And speaking of that, in your local congregations, have you had any disconnect with any of your members, or has your church services since the march been the same, or have you taken any criticism from your local bodies?
Well, for me personally, I think that my congregation was in support of the position that I had taken. And I've not received criticism, you know, from members of my congregation. Yeah. I'm sure there were some who disagreed, and that's fine, because I would not try to keep anyone from doing anything that they felt that they needed to do. And at the end of the day, I think people have to make those decisions and choices as to what they think they need to do, and I'll certainly respect their position.
Very good. We certainly appreciate you in this community, and I've worked beside you, and I will stand here, even though I'm asking some tough questions, but giving you an opportunity still to articulate to the viewers. But the important thing is we've had the march, okay, and everybody got excited over it, but now we've got to go somewhere, and we've got to move forward as you suggested. And it's my hope and my dream that this will ignite us into moving forward. Very important issue. I hope that our legislature we'll revisit this Select Committee on Minority Affairs report and do something about it instead of just reviewing it and maybe shelving it. And I certainly appreciate you giving me the opportunity to ask you some of these questions that our community has out there.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity to do it. And I think that what we've got to realize that time is now to do something. So anyway, we're out of time, and I want to thank you for serving as the guest host today. I want to thank those of you viewers for allowing us in your home, and we look forward to seeing you next time.